Welcome to May and the kickoff of our Bike Month events, which include a month-long bike challenge, today's webinar, which is do-it-yourself bike maintenance, and bike trivia, which is happening later this month. I'm Melissa Zampatella, and I'm the moderator for today's session. I'm the director of the Alewife TMA, a program managed by Transaction Associates, and joining me today to facilitate the webinar are Kelly Marsacci and Sophia Gallimore. So today's webinar is brought to you by Transaction Associates, manager of your workplace or residential buildings commuter services program. We are a full service transportation company and we manage transportation management associations as well as provide commuter benefits to private employers. Our presenter today is Galen Mook. He is the executive director of MassBike, which is a statewide bike advocacy group, and they promote bike-friendly environment and infrastructure and encourage bicycling for fun, fitness, and transportation. Before joining MassBike, Galen worked at Landry's Bicycles for 5 years, and he helped to start up the Hubway bike system, which is now known as Blue Bikes. He lives and breathes everything biking, and he's a certified bike instructor, and he designs and implements bike classes across the state. So by the end of today's session, hopefully you'll know everything you need to know about getting ready for biking season. So finally, just a couple of housekeeping items throughout the webinar. Please enter any questions that you have in the chat or questions feature, and we will address them either on the spot or at the end. And we will be doing a drawing at the end of the webinar for a $25 Amazon gift card. And this webinar will be recorded, and you'll get a follow-up email with a short survey as well. So that's about it, and I'll turn it over to Galen.
So before we dive right in, we're going to do a quick poll. So just, we just want to get a sense from everybody. Have you ever attended a bike maintenance webinar before? Pretty simple. Yes, no. How many newbies do we have? I know we did this last year, or last April or last May. So we're just curious, is this 2.0? So we'll leave this open for about, 30 seconds or so. We got about 10 seconds left. So if you haven't gotten your votes in, go ahead and do that now. All righty, we're going to close this out. And so it looks like pretty much everybody's new. So welcome, everybody.
Oh. Cool.
Take it away, Galen.
Excellent. Thanks, Kelly, Sophia, and Melissa. Always a pleasure to be here. Welcome to another Zoom. I know we're a year into Zoom fatigue, so I'm really appreciative that all of you are spending your lunch hour with me. And for those of you catching up on the video, hopefully we can meet in person at some point soon as well. So Melissa gave a great introduction and maybe a little bit intimidating. I do have quite a bit of experience, but doing bike classes and clinics and education and advocacy, but I will say that I learn something every day. Something new pops up. It's always changing. It's always information. So I'll have some knowledge. You'll have some knowledge. Feel free to share your knowledge in the chat as well. So if there's something that piques your interest or a tweak on what I'm going to talk about or a question or anything, please utilize the chat. And every so often, Kelly's going to interrupt me with a poll. So I'll be able to take a break and breathe and drink from my water bottle. So I also fully encourage that at any point, if a question pops up, feel free to just, give me a break and pause me. I'm happy to answer questions in real time. But as Melissa said, I'm Galen Mook from MassBike. We're the Massachusetts Bicycle Coalition. We do statewide advocacy, which puts us at a higher level of legislation and policies and funding. But my real joy comes from helping individuals ride. So I'm here to help you get your wheels spinning. I'll throw, well, maybe we can follow up afterwards with my email, and you can always go to massbike.org for ways of plugging into MassBike advocacy. And you can always reach out to me at galen@massbike.org just to say hi and check in and let me know how your ride is going. That said, today we are going to talk not advocacy, but more specific about your bike. And really, we'll use my bike, with the idea of getting your bike up and running after maybe a season of sticking in the garage. I'm going to be running through what I check on my bike, basic maintenance, do it yourself, nothing too deep. That's what bike shops are for generally, but we will be covering the basic safety issues of the air, the brakes, and the chain, the ABCs. For those of you, glad to know that you're new, this is your first bike webinar. We've actually done a whole ABC webinar entirely, so we'll incorporate a lot of that. And then what to watch out for if you haven't really checked up on your bike over the winter, now that it's beautiful weather. Maybe you've been riding in the rain over the past couple of weeks. So what do you need to do to keep your bike, relatively better maintained? And again, this is what your responsibility is. So what you should have in your garage or your basement or your bike room or your backyard to make sure that you are checking the air, the brakes, and then the chain to keep it all nice and clean. Cool. And again, feel free to chime in the chat. So I'll talk about my bike, but before I do, let's talk about some of the tools that I'm going to have in use today, which really are tools that you should have at home. The first is for air to put into the tires. You're going to need a pump. So this is my floor pump, and by that I mean it sits on the floor and I can pump it up. I like this pump for a couple of reasons. It's easy to use. Not every pump is easy, and every pump is finicky. Every pump is particular. This one is great because it has a nice gauge on it that I know and trust that tells me what the pressure is, which I like. And it's got a dual-sided head for the larger valve and the skinnier valve for the two different types of bike valves. We'll get into that in a minute. And I like it because this is just a fairly easy and inexpensive. I think it's cost like $30, $35. You can get a pump, $100 pump or $120 pump if you do so wish. Or you can get a really, inexpensive pump as well. You can have a hand pump, which is small and portable, which you can carry in your pack or in your bag. But really, I recommend at home, you should have a floor pump so you can be checking your tire pressure. And you want to check it maybe once a week. The next tools we're going to be using today to clean the chain and to kind of keep the cables nice and lubricated, we're going to use chain lube. This here is called Chain J. It's from a brand called Pedros. There's a bunch of different chain lubes that I'd recommend you use. As long as they're bike specific, it doesn't really quite matter. I'll go into this towards the end of the talk, but like for instance, this is a wax-based one. You can see the wax at the bottom called Rock and Roll. This, you have to shake up, and it's a lubricant that's made specifically for chains that has some wax in it. And then you might get something like this, which is a synthetic lube. You can see it says Syn Lube. On my screen, it's mirrored. I don't know if it's mirrored on your screen. I don't really remember if Zoom does that or not. But anyway, it's for bikes. It's made for bikes. And this is another Pedros brand one. Doesn't matter really what you use, but those are absolutely essential for cleaning your chain and making sure that your cable systems can get a little bit of extra lubrication if needed. And then the other tool, so we got the pump, we got the lubrication. The other tool you're going to want to have is a rag, a nice rag. T-shirts are great. This is one of my old Hubway T-shirts for anybody who remembers the old throwback logo for Hubway. And just having a rag on hand we'll talk about cleaning off the brakes. We'll talk about cleaning off the chain, cleaning off the wheels, but you need to have a clean rag to start. And the idea is it will get dirty. You are going to toss it. So have something that you know is pretty clean. So again, it's pump, lubrication, a rag, and then secondarily, minorly, this is kind of priority 2 level tools we'll use today. This is just rubbing alcohol, regular old isopropyl. This is 91 proof, or 91%, I should say. This is used for wiping off the rims of the wheel and cleaning off the brake pads themselves. You don't want to use any other solvent or degreaser agent for the brakes or anything like that. So rubbing alcohol is great. And then another secondary priority would be a cleaning agent. This stuff is called Green Fizz, basically like Simple Green or just a detergent that's got low abrasiveness, can be watered down. Something that's pretty thin, but this is also key. This will be good if you're cleaning off mud or muck, not for the chain, maybe for the gears, but pretty much for the frame, for, the fender in the back that gets all gunky, for the parts of the bike that kind of start to collect the muck. If you rode yesterday, you probably got some muck on your bike. Green fizz is pretty good, but again, this is definitely a priority 2 suggestion for what to have. And then lower down the list of priorities, priority 3, if you want to have something like WD-40. The reason this is a priority 3 and not a priority 1 is because this is not actually a lubricant. This is designed to unrust things and unstick things. We can talk a little bit about that later if it comes up of my bike is getting sticky, my brakes are like seizing up. WD-40 is really good about breaking down rust, but it is not a lubricant. So what it'll do is it'll leave a gap that then can fill with air and moisture and cause more rust. If you only use WD-40, you're gonna actually do damage to your componentry. So that's a quick hit there. But sometimes your bikes get rusty and you need to kind of unseize something that's really stuck. WD-40 is something that is coming in handy, but again, lowest priority. And then along those lines, similarly, this is a degreaser, which is a thick, very abrasive solvent. I use this very sparingly. I'm not actually going to put this into play during today's webinar, but just so you know, if you ever really need to get at your componentry, maybe you want to clean off your seat post and you can kind of pull your seat post out of the frame and get all that gunk off it. A degreaser might be helpful, but then you would need to re-grease it before you put it back in. So this is like if you have to and you really want to get into it, a degreaser is nice. And this is a bike specific one. Again, just because I have it, it's called the Pedros is the brand at the top you can see, but whatever you choose, I don't really care what brand as long as it's made for bicycles. So again, quick tools that we're really going to need, very basic, the priorities, a pump, some chain lube, oh, pardon me, I just thought about there, some rags, and some rubbing alcohol is really what we're going to be using today. Cool. I'll quick pause. Any questions that are coming up, Kelly? Is everybody on the same page so far?
Everybody looks good. Yeah. We've been putting some info in the chat for everyone too, as far as, MassBike's website, Galen's email, the tools that Galen just went over. So we're looking good.
Excellent. Cool. So I'll have you for the next about half an hour, maybe less than that, maybe like 25 minutes is what our run through is going to be. So we'll be pretty quick, but again, feel free to interrupt. So here's my bike. It's going to be different than your bike. But what we're going to be talking about today are probably the universals of what my bike will have and your bike should have. So a little bit about this bike. This is a mountain bike. You can see it's kind of got fatter tires, got knobby tires. It's got bars that are flat, which might be different than yours. If you have a road bike that has down bars, you'll have a different way to hit the brakes and a different way to shift. But chances are you have brake levers that are at the handlebars. Some bikes have back pedal brakes, especially kids' bikes, but what we're going to talk today is cable pull brakes from the handlebars. And then the shifter I have on here as well. I have a grip shifter, so I can kind of like turn at my handlebars. I know it's tough to see on the Zoom, but believe me, there's a grip shifter there, and that changes the gearing. And then on my bike, you can kind of see in the back, I have a gear cluster that has multiple gears in the rear back here. That has a derailleur that can move. It's got multiple gears in the front. The idea is that this is a multiple geared bike, and that's something to keep in mind as we clean the chain. So your bike is probably a little bit different than mine, but what we are going to cover, air, brakes, and chain, ABCs, mostly are universal on every bike. So the first thing we're going to do is the ABC check. We're going to make sure that we've got air in the tires, that our brakes are working and locking out okay, that our chain is attached, clean, and functional, and hopefully this translates into your bike just the same. Differences that your bike might have, these brakes, for instance, you can see at the wheel, they are brakes that hit on the rim. Some bikes have what are called disc brakes that are down in the center of the wheel. We're not going to cover that very much today because that's not as common. However, if there are particular questions around it, feel free to ask towards the end. You might only have one gear, or you might have a different set of gear clusters. So it might not be 100% one-to-one, but chances are you have a chain that rotates and needs to, have some strength and lubrication to it. And you might have a different size tire, might have a different width, might be slick, might have a different wheel size that it fits on. And that would change how much pressure is required for the tire. So you're going to need to know how your bike works. If you don't know and you are totally lost, which is totally fine because that happens, and bikes don't come with the best manuals, you can always bring your bike to a bike shop and ask somebody at the shop, hey, what are the size of my tires? How do my brakes work? Where's the adjuster on my brake? Things along those lines. I guarantee you that the shop staff would be more than happy to introduce you to a little bit about your bikes, because they want you, well, two things. They want you to ride your bike, obviously, that's why they sold it to you. But really, they want you to maintain your bike with the basics that you are responsible for. The goal is to take care of the stuff at home, so you free up the bike mechanic at the shop to really take care of the stuff that they have to do. Changing out brake pads, maybe a bike mechanic is needing to do that. Changing out the cabling system, maybe a bike mechanic is needed for that. But pumping up tires, that's on you. Checking your brakes, that's on you. Cleaning your chain, that is on you. So that's
Actually
what
a
we're
good
gonna cover.
segue, Galen, for our next polling question.
Oh, great.
for-
Please interrupt.
Yep.
Jump in,
Yeah,
Kelly.
absolutely. So on my bike, I am comfortable doing. So please check all that apply. I'm comfortable changing a flat tire. I'm comfortable tightening my brakes, cleaning and putting the chain back on. You know, I'm comfortable doing maybe a complete tune-up. I'm a pro, or yeah, that is what my bike shop is for. So again, we'll leave this
Good.
open for about another 10 seconds or so.
Excellent. And any questions, pop them in the chat as well. The next thing we're going to go through is the ABC check. I will show you what that is, and then we'll break it down air to brakes to chain, specifically for, you know, reawakening a bike that's been dormant for a couple of months.
Beautiful. So we're going to end this poll and we're going to show everybody the results. So it looks like, yep, a lot of people are going to their bike shop, especially initially. That's me, no shame. But, you know, we have some people that are also comfortable, you know, putting the chain back on, tightening the brakes, you know, less people so on changing a flat tire, and not a lot of pros. So we're all in this together.
I love it. Excellent. So that'll be great. And again, you'll have different tips than I will. There is no one way to do everything. So if you've got a different suggestion for folks, please utilize the chat. Cool. So the ABC check, again, air, brakes, and chain. These are the essential components that need to be working every single time you ride your bike. Got to have air in the tires. Got to be able to stop quickly and successfully. And you got to make sure your chain is not going to break on you or slip on you. So when you ride, you get full resistance and full control. So the ABC check is something that I want you to build into your habits of just whenever you're getting on your bike after parking it at a coffee shop, or pulling it out of the car at the rail trail, or before you head out to work, do your ABC check. And frankly, literally, even if you're going to be hopping on your bike several times that day, I do my ABC check every single time, because I never know if I'm going to have a slow leak, or my brakes might accidentally get bonked and unhooked, or my chain might drop. And if you are sitting on your bike and putting your full weight and your pedal stroke, that's a lot of force, you can break your chain if it's not attached properly. Or you might not have brakes and you're halfway down the hill before you realize it. Or you got a flat tire and you bike on, you know, a flat tire for a couple of blocks, possibly damaging your wheel. And if any of these ABCs are not working, can't ride your bike. Got to fix it. So here's the check that I want you to build into your habit. A, check the air. Just squeeze the tire. Give it a good squeeze. Make sure it feels right. We'll cover how you'll know in a second, but just a quick ABC check is, do you have enough air? Great. And since you have two tires, check both. Check the front, check the back. And then we'll habitually, after time, you'll know what it feels like to have a softer tire. So you'll know when you have to pump it up just a little bit or a lot, but you'll need to know by testing it. That's the A, super easy. B for brakes, squeeze the brakes from the brake levers. And actually, I should say these are brake levers. The brakes themselves are at the wheel. But if I squeeze the brakes, I want to make sure that there's enough distance between the handlebar and the brake lever. I do about 2 or 3 fingers worth, just like making sure that it's not going all the way in. So I can do an emergency stop, boom. And what I'll do is I'll squeeze the brake levers and rock my bike, and I'll make sure that my wheels are locked up, which is important because sometimes the, and it's kind of hard to see, but I've unhooked my brake right here. I've kind of taken off the cable right here. So now I don't have any front brakes. So if I were to do my ABC check, it's not working. I can rotate my wheel even though I'm trying to engage my brake. So I will need to say, oh, my front brake isn't working. Let's see why. Let's fix it, check it. Now it works. So the B check is just squeeze the brakes and rock the bike. Easy peasy. And the C check for chain is, my camera down. I just lift my back wheel just about an inch off the ground and pedal forwards and make sure that the chain is attached. Make sure that when I spin the pedals that it actually moves the chain and rotates the rear wheel. Nothing is rubbing on the rear wheel. It doesn't sound like it's hitting the frame. Doesn't sound like it's hitting the brakes. And if I was ever to be in a bad gear, for instance, if I were to shift, I'll shift with my grip shifter here, which is really bad because I didn't pedal. You can kind of see that by pedaling forwards, my chain will kind of reset itself. And now I've kind of reset my bike just by spinning the pedals. If that's confusing, we'll cover that in a moment, don't worry. The idea being the C check is just kind of lifting the bike and just kind of giving a pedal stroke or two and making sure that the back wheel is moving freely and the chain has reset itself and it doesn't sound like it's clunky. And then I'll probably spin my front wheel as well, just to make sure there's no rub and make sure that everything is nice and smooth and there's no friction from the brakes or hitting the frame. So again, ABC check, takes less than 10 seconds. Ready? Squeeze, squeeze, feels good. Squeeze the brakes, rock it back and forth, feels pretty good. Lift up back wheel, spin, that feels pretty good. And then I'll do my front wheel, boom. That's it, super easy. Get in the habit of it and it will save you so much hassle. If any of those components weren't working, you need to make sure that they are. And I've learned this from experience. I've broken a chain when riding because the chain was not in good condition. I have ridden on a flat tire and ruined a wheel. And I've had brakes that I thought were functional and turns out they weren't. And I've made mistakes. So a lot of this stuff comes from personal experience. And hopefully you don't make the same mistakes that I have, which is why I'm here for you. Again, very basics, air, brakes, and chain. Great. So let's break this down. This is going to be pretty quick. And I should say that all of this stuff also lives in continuing education on YouTube channels. Park Tool is a great resource. We've done other webinars with Transaction that have dived deeper into some of this stuff, including changing a flat and others. So this is just scratching the surface on how far you can go down into DIY bike mechanics. But regardless if you want to stay shallow or deep, everybody's got to know the A, B, and C. So breaking down the A. For air, you have air inside of a tube, which is inside of this tire. Now, you'll need to know what your tire is rated to in terms of the pressure. Every tire has different pressure. It's based on how wide the tire is, the type of composite rubber that it's made of, and what the tire is made for. Some tires are made for off-road, like mine. Some tires are made for riding on-road, like a road bike tire. They'll have different pressure. We can go into a lot of different complexities about benefits of width and what your bike is rated for. We can't get into that now. Interest of time, it really is just to focus on, do you have enough pressure in the tire? So the way to check how much pressure your tire is rated to is actually to look along the edge of the tire, what's called the sidewall, and see if you can find, it'll have a lot of numbers and a lot of words. See if you can find the letters PSI, which stands for pounds per square inch, and that will tell you roughly what the rating is for. Let me see if, this is always a little tricky on Zoom, but if I can show you mine, it's a little tough to see, but it's right here. And it says 35 to 80 PSI. Now, elsewhere on the tire, it'll say something like made in Taiwan or It'll have the logo, or maybe even the branding where it says here, you'll see it says Crossroads. But really what we're looking for is the P, the S, and the I, which again is like right about there. You see how hard it is to see? Your tire might be more difficult than mine. If you don't see it, keep looking for it. Now, it's a range. I have 35 to 80 for this front tire. Now, I have two different tires, so I should do the same for my rear tire, knowing it's a different brand. So you'll need to find out, what your tire is rated to, and if you have different tires, they're going to have different ratings. I have 35 PSI to 80 PSI. It's a big, broad range. The reason that my tires have a range is because they're made for what's the phrase? Made for versatility. They're made to be ridden off-road, and they're also made to be ridden on-road. And the beauty of having a range means that I could have softer tires closer to 35 pounds per square inch, or I could have harder tires made for 80 pounds per square inch, and I can choose based on the preference of the style of my riding, whether I want my tires to be more squishy at 35 or be more harder at 80. And a lot of it depends on the terrain with which I want to ride, or on which I want to ride. On a squishier tire at 35 PSI, it means that my tire squishes more, which means that the knobs in here get a little bit more traction, get a little bit more surface area, and they can dig in a little bit more to the dirt, the gravel, the sand, or whatever I'm riding on. However, if I were to ride at 35 PSI on the road, it would squish on the tarmac and actually cause a lot of friction between the rubber of my tire and the tarmac of the pavement. And that friction eats away a lot of the energy and slows you down. The harder the tire, in the 80 range with mine, the faster I will go on the street. The softer the tire, the slower I will go on the streets. However, speed's not a concern. If I'm not worried about being a little bit inefficient, I might want to be on the lower end because it's squishier and therefore softer, which means it kind of absorbs a little bit of the bumps, doesn't jar my wrists as much, makes it a softer ride, but it definitely makes it a slower ride. The reason that you should know what your range is because you'll need to be within that range. A mountain bike like this has a wide range. A road bike has a much narrower range with which the tires are manufactured for. So on a road bike, for instance, thinner wheels, higher pressure, just based off physics and volume and stuff that's, basic physics principles. The narrower the space, the higher the pressure. You're probably looking at around 100 pounds per square inch, which is a lot compared to my 35 pounds per square inch. And just for reference, car tires also use PSIs. Car tires, much bigger, made for a lot of force and carrying way more weight, tons of weight. They're rated to about 30 PSI or even 28 pounds per square inch. So this bike tire has more air pressure in it than your car tire does, just based off volume. That's how that works. So keep in mind that you're going to need to know, and again, you'll need to know by checking your rating. On my bike, I can choose. Your bike might only have a maximum. It might just say 80, or it might just say 100, in which case you really want to get to that number. Or it might say 60 to 80, in which case you can choose. If you go below that number, if I was below 35 here, what happens is I run the risk of getting a flat. I run the risk of there's too much squish in my tire. That squish pinches the inner tube against my rim, and that could lead to what we call a pinch flat or a snake bite flat, where the inner tube gets two little holes in it and it completely deflates. And the reason that you get a pinch flat typically is because there's too much squish in the tire. The tire squishes in, pinches against the rim, get a flat, you're walking home. So the beauty of knowing your tire pressure's rating is keep it at least above the minimum, and you'll avoid getting a pinch flat. And pinch flats happen when you ride off a curb or hit a pothole or hit a rock or something that causes compression, and then that leads to a flat. When I was in the bike shop, I would probably say like 80 to 90% of the flats that we were fixing came from pinch flats. And the only way that we recommend avoiding a pinch flat, pump up your tires. Make sure you're at the minimum at least. If I go too high, if I go above 80, I do run the risk of the tire slipping off the rim and the inner tube poking through and exploding. It's rare, but it happens. It's very loud, and that's the case, then the tube is completely dead and you might have damaged the tire as well. But know that there's an upper limit to how much pressure your tires can take. So once you know that range, then you can choose somewhere in that range based on your preference of riding. So a lot of explanation, but hopefully if you've never done this before, you can go down and search where it's written on the side of your tire what your rating is. Cool. So that said, you got your tires, you know your rating, let's check it. The way that we check it and the way that we get familiar with the A squeeze test is just getting used to what it feels like to have your pump attached and have it be at different pressure pounds per square inch and knowing what that squeeze test feels like. So in order to comfortably put your pump onto the valve of your wheel, of your inner tube, you're going to need to know a couple things. First off, what valve system is your bike made for? There's two different types of bike valves that are common in the States. There is what is known as the Schrader valve. You can see it says Schrader valve. It's kind of the fatter one. It's the same type of valve that car tires use. Let me see if I can open up this box. If you've pumped up an inner tube in a car or have a bike like this, is probably a very common one. You'll see it's got a little dust cap on it. This is what a Schrader valve looks like. It's standard, it's common. It's made for a little bit wider wheels. So if you've got a mountain bike or a cruiser bike or a balloon tire bike, you're gonna have this. The other type of valve is called a Presta valve. I'll get this dust cover up for you. And you'll see it's a much thinner valve. If I put the two next to each other, you have the Schrader right here, and then you have the Presta right here. Notice the difference. These are the two common types of valves, and you're going to need to know which one your bike is made for. They operate slightly differently. So the Schrader valve, you can see it's kind of got this inner plunger, we'll call it, or kind of like a little piece of metal. In order to access the valve, you actually have to depress that. You kind of got to get in there with a key or something, and that will actually access the valve. A pump will depress that inner metal and it will open up the valve. On a Presta valve, you don't have that. What you have is a brass tip that you need to unscrew. And now I've gotten the valve open. And then when I put the air in and I'm done, I want to screw that back down. And now the valve is closed. You need to know this. For those of you who this is new for, great, now you know. The beauty of knowing which valve you have, then you're going to need to know how your pump interfaces with it. Remember I talked about my pump head having two different valve heads. I got the bigger one at the top for Schrader, and I've got the thinner one at the bottom for Presta. My pump is made for both. Your pump is going to need to be made for whatever your valve system is. Most modern pumps are universal. So there's one hole made for both types. Or you'll have a pump head that's made for either, and you'll just need to know which one to activate. Or sometimes there's a pump that has one on one side and another head on another side, one for Presta, one for Schrader. You're going to need to know which is which. So when I'll demonstrate real quick what happens if I don't unscrew the Presta valve, and I'll put the pump head on it, and you'll see. Let's see if I can do this over Zoom. Put it on. If I haven't opened up my valve and I try to pump up, you'll see that I will push down and nothing is really happening. And maybe I'll push down one pump and you'll see that within one pump, I am already at something like 85 PSI, which is crazy town. So obviously the interface between my pump and my valve is not good. So you have to fix that. So the way to fix that is to diagnose why. Sometimes it's just a bad connection, but what I'm going to do is pull my pump head off. And for this, oh, I didn't unscrew it. I'm going to unscrew this tip. And then I'll put it on my pump valve. And then when I do a pump, this tube will start to take shape and it's much easier. Now, again, this is done outside as a demonstration. Obviously, this happens inside of the tire, so you can't really see it happening, but you should know that if you're trying to pump down and it's not connecting, something is wrong. So I put some air in the tires, but notice that it's open. If it's closed, now I won't lose any air. Pump head is totally, the valve is totally closed. Open it up. Now I can deflate it. You'll see it. Cool. So for those of you who that's unfamiliar to, this is a really handy way to keep checking on your bike to make sure you know what valve you have, Cresta or Schrader, and then to know how that interfaces with your pump. That said, if you're unfamiliar with the size of your tire, size of your tube, the type of valve you have, bring it to a bike shop. There are some slight discrepancies depending on types of bikes. You'll know it once you know it, but if you don't know it, probably having somebody take a look at it's probably the easiest way to get you up on the speed.
Hey, Galen,
Cool.
just
Yes,
a quick
please.
question. Is there anything like a tubeless tires for bikes?
Oh, good question. Yeah, Sophia, so that is a good question. There are tubeless tires. So tubeless tires is kind of well, it's an emerging technology that's becoming more and more popular, especially for mountain biking. The way it works is, and it's kind of even, I don't use it because it's not common. It's a different type of tire system that interfaces with the rim that you can just put air into and you don't actually need an inner tube. Those are good because you can ride really soft and you aren't worried about a pinch flat. However, if there's a hole or you do get a problem and a deflation problem, the beauty of having a tube system like mine is, if I have a problem with my tube, I can replace my tube. It's not as easy to do that in a tubeless system because the tube itself, the tire itself is kind of glued or kind of like gunked in and affixed into the rim to create a seal. So it's more complicated than what I'm familiar with using a tube system. That is a really good question. And there are a few bikes that you can buy these days, but only a handful that have solid rubber. So you don't even have an air system at all. It's just rubber.
Thank you.
Cool. And I should say that this tube system was invented in like the 1920s. Before that, everything was just straight rubber. The beauty of the tube system, though, is that it absorbs a lot of the bumps. If you have just solid rubber, you're going to feel every crack, every rock, every little bump in the road. So having an air system is, it's a shock system as well. Cool. All right, just to round this out, I know what my tire is rated to. I know what type of valve my tube takes. So I'm going to actually go ahead and check with my pump what pressure I am at. So I have a Schrader valve here, right here. So I know how to do it since I've already tested it out. I know I'm going to use my top slot for my pump head. I'm going to firmly, see if I can do this without blocking it, firmly put this on, and I'll lose a slight amount of air in the process. But what I want to do is basically get one pump all the way up and all the way down. And what will happen is it'll create air in the chamber, force it through the hose into the tube, and it'll pass through the valve. So I can test to see what my valve is at. And this says, it's a little hard to see, but this says 50 PSI. See if I can get my camera a little closer. So I'm rated 2 on my valve here with one pump, just to normalize it. I'm at a little over 50 PSI. So that is totally within my range. I know that if I chose to, I could stop right here and I could ride at 50. The thing I want you to go away with after today's lesson is pump it to a PSI that you know and trust and give it a squeeze. What does 50 feel like? Feels pretty hard. Though I could go all the way to 80. So let's go a little bit up. I'll go a couple of pumps. I'll be at 60 PSI and give that a squeeze. What does that feel like? This is something that I want you to habitualize and get familiar with so that when you are doing your ABC check, boom, quick squeeze, you're ready to roll. Or, oh, that's really soft. I'm going to put some air in my tires. You will be surprised. If this is new to you, you're going to say, oh, I have enough air in my tires, no problem. But if you have a road bike or a hybrid bike and you haven't pumped up your tires in a week or two, chances are you're going to be low. Chances are you're going to be 10 or 20 or even 30 or more PSI below what you're rated to, which again is dangerous. You could lead to a flat. So know your pressure based off the pump, based off the rating, based off the squeeze test. Super easy once you get familiar with it, but if you've never done it, it's worth taking the 20 minutes to get familiar with the different levels of pressure to squeeze it. And then when I'm ready, because my pump works and I know how to do it, I close this lever and then I gently pull the pump head off and I make it look easy. If you've got a new pump or you're unfamiliar with your pump, it is pretty finicky sometimes to use a pump. Every pump has its own challenges. You're just going to have to get familiar with it, unfortunately. But again, trust the gauge and then relate that to the squeeze.
Beautiful. I'm gonna pause and just do the next polling question. So that's a good, if you can check your tire pressure, how, familiar are you with it? So our next poll is, how long have you been biking? So, we're curious, have you just gotten started biking? Maybe you started biking during the pandemic, maybe you've been biking for years, or maybe you're brand new to biking and you're just, here to sort of get the basics from Galen and get started. So again, we'll leave this open for about another 10 seconds or so. I know we're getting, close on time, 12:40. So
Yeah, I got about 10 minutes more maybe for you.
perfect. Then we'll have questions at the end. So, okay. So it looks like we have a lot of votes in. So if you don't have yours in, go ahead and squeeze that in before we close out. All right, wonderful. So it looks like we have a whole bunch of people that have been biking for quite a few years. A good, a split between just getting started and then starting since the pandemic. I'm among you. But yeah, so go ahead and take it away, Galen.
Cool, excellent. Thanks, Kelly. The reason I spent so much time on the tire pressure is because it's the most common problem that people have out there, and it's the most common problem that fails, that prevents people from riding. I should also say that I check my tire pressure with a pump and a gauge about once a week. If I ride every day, even though I do my squeeze test every time, I also then do a confirmation to make sure that it is accurate. And if you let your bike sit for a week, it's going to lose 10 PSI, 20 PSI, just normally, because the valves are imperfect. So get regularly in the habit of just putting a pump on and putting some pressure in. If your tire is low, you're going to ride slower. If you're riding to work, I guarantee you will make up the time it takes to pump up your tire by being faster out on the roads and pathways. It's worth it. And again, it prevents the failure of having a flat. And I should also mention, while you're at searching on your tire for the proper pressure, also take a look at your tires. Are they bare? Are they losing threading? Let me see if I can showcase just one or two examples of, I'll just use this one as my example, but if you start to see cracking or threading that shows up on the sidewall, your tires might need to be replaced. The rubber wears out. If you're noticing damage or any bulging where the tube looks like it's poking through, or there's cracks in the tire, it's okay to get tires replaced. I get, a new set of tires every year, pretty much. Very common. And if you're unfamiliar with how to do it, a whole other level to change your tires out, but it's worth knowing how to do yourself, given an opportunity. So maybe that's another webinar we can do in the future. But the be all end all for checking your bike is, how is the threading on the sidewall? Is there bulging? Are there cracks? And just do a good inspection of both your tires, and you might find some glass that you're picking out, or might find a staple or something to pull out that hasn't damaged it yet, but to do some preventative maintenance on it will keep that stone or staple or piece of glass from working its way through the rubber. Cool.
Hey, Galen, can I ask you another question?
Please, yeah.
Okay, so someone said, I have a road bike. One tire deflates by 30 or so PSI after a couple of weeks, but the other drops by more than 80. I could not find a leak. What could be going on?
Ooh, good question. The leak could really be a very slow leak. And like I mentioned, these valves, especially if they're the Schrader valves, because they're made for lower pressure, these are very imperfect, and it's a little hard to see in there, but there's like a spring and a piece of metal, and there's a rubber gasket. There's a lot that could fail over time where it just doesn't create a very good seal. So just having it leak normally, that's not uncommon, unfortunately, especially if it's over a couple of weeks. If it's over a day, or you pump it up in the morning and it's flat by lunchtime, then you've got a real problem and you need to change it out. But if it's only really happening over several weeks, I could say you're probably okay riding. However, your tube is probably getting to be on its last legs. And just like anything, these degrade over time. And I wouldn't be surprised if getting a new tube would fix that problem. Cool. Great. I'm going to jump right into brakes because I realize we're going a little long and I want to make sure we wrap up with a little bit of time for questions. So the be all end all for brakes is, do you stop? Does activating the brake levers have enough force to keep the wheels from spinning? So there's a couple of principles at play here, which you'll have to check up on. First off, again, we're talking about rim brakes here. Check the rubber of the brake pads against the rim. Are my brakes lined up? Do the brake pads align with the metal of the rim? That's super important because sometimes the brake pads themselves could get skewed or twisted or just maneuvered. And you might be able to, with a tool, with a multi-tool, although we're not going to do it today, or bring it to a bike shop for a little brake adjustment, but check to make sure that the rubber is hitting the wheel. It could be the wheel's out of alignment or it could be the pad is out of alignment, but something has to be done to align the two. Secondly, how much rubber do you have? Now, on my bike, I'll show you that I can actually unhook this clip right here and open up my brakes. See if I can do this one-handed, but I doubt it. No, I'll do it on the ground. And I have a quick release lever, so I can actually pull open my brakes. And now you can see that my brake is further out from the rim, right here. And that allows me to kind of diagnose the rubber to see if I have enough, to see if there's debris caught in it, to see if I can clean it. So the first thing, does it align? The second thing, how much pad do I have left? And my quick release is going to be different than yours. You might have, on a road bike particularly, they have a little dial down by the brake itself. You might be able to twist a little dial to open up the brake just slightly, just ever so slightly, so you can get in there with a rag for some rubbing alcohol or some sandpaper. But it also is good to take a look. And sometimes, and I won't be able to show you too much here, if we were in person, I could show you different examples though, but there might be bits of metal that are embedded inside of the rubber. And that's something you got to watch out for, maybe even pick away at and flick away at. You can do it with a knife or a cute paper clip, or something that you can kind of make sure that the pad itself is clean and free of debris. You can also take this rubbing alcohol, like I mentioned earlier. This is really nifty because rubbing alcohol evaporates without leaving any residue. So this is actually one of my favorite tools to use, because what all I got to do is put a little rubbing alcohol on a rag, not a lot, just a little bit, and then I can wipe down my rim, and you can see that I get some gunk off, and it doesn't leave any residue, doesn't leave film like my simple green would leave. This is the only thing I would recommend for cleaning off brakes. You want rubbing alcohol only. I can also put a little more rubbing alcohol on this and kind of wipe down the brakes, like I was mentioning. If I can get at the brake itself, I can kind of get at the brake pad and clean that off, and you'll see a lot of debris and grit that comes off. Now, what you're cleaning off is actually little bits of metal, because that's what gets caught in the rim, and you can really kind of, do this endlessly. There's really no perfect cleanliness. Whenever you're riding, you are going to get a little bit of that grit and grime within the wheels, within the brakes. So having a little bit of rubbing alcohol goes a long way. And again, wiping down the rims, wiping down the brake pad will create a debris-free surface, and then that can actually be enhanced if you have a little sandpaper, which I don't have in my kit, but you could get some sandpaper to kind of rough up the brake pad a little bit, cause it to be a little bit more tacky. That's really nifty. The last thing about brakes is to check in on the cabling system. So talked a little bit about how the brakes hit down by the wheel, but when I mentioned earlier about being able to squeeze the brake lever and make sure there's enough distance between the brake lever and the handlebar, there are probably what we call barrel adjusters somewhere along the brake line. Mine are right here. Now, barrel adjusters work by being able to change the tension of the cable based off screwing and unscrewing the adjuster. See if I can give you a good vantage point here. On my bike, they're right here. They look like little knurled, ridged little metal barrels that go in right where the brake cable comes through. If you've got a road bike, yours might be down by the brake itself or somewhere along the line. Look for the little ridged barrel. Now, this will allow you to, let's see if I can get this without, a little hard to see here, but you can see that mine's actually unscrewed a little bit, which means that my cable is pretty tense and you can see I've got a good distance. The way that these barrel adjusters work is, I'll get the lock out of the way. If I screw this barrel in towards my brake, I'm actually loosening my brake cable. And you can see how far I can pull my brake lever now. I can pull it to within about an inch or so of my handlebar. And that's just the front brake cable that goes down to the brake, comes through the barrel before it goes into the brake lever itself. So the tip that I want you to go home with is play around with these barrels. No tools needed. What I can do is I can unscrew this barrel and you can see it kind of starts to come out of my handlebar system. See if I can get this a little closer and you can see based off my camera. You see it kind of come out of the barrel. There's a couple of threads there. And now what I've done is tightened up my brake cable. So you can see that I have much more distance between my brake lever and my handlebar. And my brake is that much sharper and stronger. I don't need to pull as hard to get a very strong brake. So that's really nifty. Find the barrel adjuster on your brake and be comfortable playing around with it based off your preference. The be all end all is, do you stop sharply? And if you do, great. But if not, you might need to tighten your brake a little bit. And what I do here is unscrew it. Okay, that feels pretty good. All right, I'm ready to roll. It's that simple. Knowing that you have a front brake and a back brake, test both, do whatever is within your comfort level. Don't startle yourself. You're really going to need to make sure that you're stopping strongly and securely and safely. But that system includes brake pads, making sure they're aligned and cleaned, the rim, making sure the rim of the wheel is cleaned, and then the cable system itself, making sure the cable has enough tension, which you can maneuver and mess with the barrel adjuster, which is somewhere along the cable line. That's it for the B. It's super simple, no tools needed, but you can do it yourself. But the be all end all is testing whether or not the brakes actually lock the bike out. Cool. I'm going to jump into C and spend 2 minutes on there. But Kelly, is there anything else before we jump into the final session?
Yep. So we're just going to launch a quick polling question. You know, we all know it's May and it's National Bike Month. So we are curious. We are doing an online bicycle challenge at eCommuter. So will you be participating in this month's bicycle challenge? Yes, I've already signed up. Yes, I'm signing up after this webinar. No, I'm not sure. Or what challenge? So again, we'll leave this open for about another 10 seconds or so. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and end that poll. So looks like some people have signed up for the challenge and some people haven't yet. So definitely after this webinar, you know, go to ecommuter.org. That's our online platform for all things commuter tools, and it's free. You know, it's free to join. And we'll send some directions to you in the after webinar email and also in the chat. So thanks, Galen.
Excellent. Cool. And I realize we only have about 5 minutes left. Is there any questions coming in the chat that I want to address before jumping into the chain to round us out?
Well, there is one, Galen, but it's about e-bikes. So I thought I would wait right to the end so you could give us your feel regarding e-bikes and commuting with
Cool.
e-bikes.
Cool. Yeah, we'll do. And again, this is a general level. If there's anything specific about your bike, check in with your bike shop. They'd be happy to step you through the specifics of how your bike is particular. But again, it's probably air, probably brakes with a lever, and there's probably a chain, which we'll check right now. So the chain is the go of the bike. It's where the force of your pedal stroke coming in from your cranks is translated through the chain and moves that rear wheel and takes a lot of force from your power and translates that to moving your bike. However, the chain itself is actually pretty fragile and very precise, and it will start to wear out, and you need to keep it in good condition. So to demo, I've got this wooden chain link. This is my favorite tool to use for these webinars because it's very hard to describe a chain if I can't do it in person and hand it to you. So we'll do this wooden chain link as an example. And what we're going to learn is how to clean your chain. It's a very easy process. The 4-step process. You wipe the chain down, you put the lubrication on, you let it sit and work its way through the chain, and then you wipe it down again. It's that simple. It takes about 15 minutes, maybe a little longer, especially because you have to wait a little bit, but I will do it in my quick 2-minute demo. Before I do my 2-minute demo, or my 30-second demo really, I'll tell you why the chain needs to be clean. So imagine this is a chain link. You have the outer link here and the inner link here, and there's lots of rotation. Now you have these spinning rollers. There's a pin in the middle that holds it all together, and it is so precise and finite. It's also spinning and moving and getting hundreds of thousands of rotations in your riding. It collects a lot of the gunk that you're riding through, and that gunk filters its way inside of the chain. So that's the key, is the stuff that gets caught in the chain, you have to be cautious of. I'm going to deconstruct this real quick, just so you see what's going on. There's a pin. I'll pull out the pin. There's the outer link, and then there's the inner link, and the inner links have these rollers. And so there's lots of little places for stuff to get trapped and caught. Now, what cleaning your chain does, it basically acts as a flushing. I'll put this all back together. It acts to flush through the chain. You put lubrication in, flushes through the chain, gets all the gunk out, pushes it out, and in its place, it leaves grease, leaves specific bike lubrication. And that is key to making sure that the interior of the chain is nice and debris-free as much as possible and has lubrication. Anything on the exterior of the chain is excess. You wipe it off, you got to get rid of it. You do not want a gunky chain, do not want a wet, greased up chain. That's why you do the 4-step process. The process is as such, and I guarantee demonstrating wise we'll get done in 30 seconds, but I'm happy to answer questions a little bit after, realizing we are at time. But the way it works is basically you need to get a chain specific lubricant where you put a drop of lube in where the links meet, and you want 1 drop essentially where each link sits so that it can work its way through. I'll use this lube. This is my synthetic lube. It doesn't matter really which kind of lube you use, but you should know that some is made thinner, made for drier conditions. Some is made thicker for wetter conditions. It's May, it's going to be raining. I'm probably going to use the thicker stuff. The 4-step process again, if I can actually get this angled here. You wipe the chain down. I'll pull the light in a little bit here too. You'll wipe the chain down, you'll put the lube on, you'll wait, and then you'll wipe it off. So to wipe the chain down, I just pedal backwards, and that's it. And I might like clean off some of the pulley wheels, and I'll get some grit off. You can see a little bit of that grit coming off. I could do that all day long. Second part is to put the chain lube on, taking the chain specific. If you're a type A person, you can do dot by dot by dot by dot. Or if you're a type B person, a little stream and a little back pedal. The goal is to make sure that a little bit of grease of chain lube makes its way where the links meet. You don't need a lot. And you let it sit. You let it sit for 15 minutes. Maybe you'll go on a bike ride to work it through the chain. The goal is it's got to get inside of where the rollers and pins and links meet. Once you've waited, some people wait overnight, some people wait after a ride. The last step arguably is the most important step because the chain grease is already through the chain. You just do the first step over again by wiping the chain down. And what I'm doing here is I'm squeezing the sides of the chain, then I'll squeeze the top and the bottom of the chain and just run it through. And if you've done your due diligence of getting the grease through the chain, you're going to start to get a lot of that gunk off. And that really is all you have to do. Do it maybe once every 6 weeks or after the end of a really rainy week. But again, the goal is to clean through the chain, make sure that the grease gets inside where the links are meeting. And then if you haven't done this and it sounds like you're riding with a family of mice, where you've got a lot of rust on your chain's not going to flow efficiently. You're not going to shift properly. It's not going to change gears as easily. And you might end up breaking your chain because what happens is it'll get really rusty in the interior, cause a lot of friction, put a hard pedal stroke down, and you could snap your chain. So cleaning your chain is a safety tool as well. So with that, I think I'll end it there, realizing that we are just at time. And I want to say thank you for your hour with us. Check out eCommuter, participate in the May Challenge, and there's so much more we could talk about with bike maintenance. So keep in touch with MassBike, with all of us at Transaction, and we're here for you.
Hey, Galen, just quickly, your opinion about transitioning to an e-bike, for someone that commutes 20 miles or more round trip. Is there any type of maintenance that you can do on the e-bike?
Yeah, you do the same. I imagine you're going to have air to pump in the tires. I imagine you'll have similar style brakes. You might have different disc brakes. So your bike shop will need to guide you through how to check your brakes. And I bet you have a chain that changes gears just the same. So I think the A, the B, and the C are probably translatable to your e-bike as well. I'm a big fan of e-bikes, even though I don't have them. I'm a big fan of promoting them because I know it helps people ride farther, helps people who maybe have limited mobility, and it helps people who maybe have terrain that they are wary of riding over. And if you're a commuter, you get to work a little bit less sweaty, might be a benefit. And then also, different type of bike, like this bike is made for the woods. Maybe your e-bike is made for your longer distance. Maybe the road bike is made for fitness. So there might be different bikes that you have in your shed as well. And an e-bike is great to have in the repertoire.
Okay, and just one more popped up. What should I carry with me on my bike for contingencies?
Oh, great question. I don't have it here, but a small pump, especially if you know how to pump up your own tires, that's key. And then if you know how to change a tire, you might want to bring a tube, knowing that the size of the tube. Inside of here, I have some bike tire levers. I have an extra set of bike lights, because that's always something that I always want to have on hand if I'm ever caught at night. And then this, I didn't get into it, but this is a tool, and I'll pull it out of the bag. This is a multi-tool that has all of the Allen wrenches and hex wrenches. Even if I don't know how to use it, it's nifty to have a tool like this, because if I'm stuck on a ride, maybe another cyclist can pass by and help me out with their knowledge. But if you don't have the tool, you can't do things like tighten the brakes or tighten cables. Definitely a level 2.0 in our conversation about well beyond just regular maintenance, but a small little multi-tool that has the ability to get at a variety of size bolts is also key. So tire concerns, tire levers, and a pump, and maybe a spare tube. And then this multi-tool, and then an extra set of lights. Just generally, I like to have extra lights on hand, and a credit card and a phone.
Yeah, those standard things. So beautiful. So I know we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar today that we were going to do a $25 prize drawing. So thanks for sticking out with us. So congratulations to Ben R. We'll be in touch with you after the webinar to get you your gift card.
Nice. Congrats, Ben. Cool. And I'm happy to stick around for a few more minutes. I know that we are a few minutes over, but I appreciate all of your extended time. So if there's any more questions, feel free to pepper them.
Yeah, I mean, we do have another polling question if anyone's interested in that, just curiosity's sake, So where do you go most on your bike? So this is one of those check all that applies, multiple choice things. So do you bike to work? Do you bike to the store? Do you bike on trails and paths, maybe roads around your home? Looks like a lot of the early votes coming in are trails and bike paths. So it's a beautiful time for that. I mean, it's getting nicer and nicer out. So, all right. So it looks like almost all our votes are in. And yep. Trails and bike paths with 69% of the vote, and then roads around my home, and then to work. So yeah, as we all start getting back, thinking about our commutes, biking will be up there.
Oh, good. Yeah. And May is Bike to Work month, although not a lot of people are biking to work these days. So we're going to have challenges throughout the whole season. So keep in touch with Transaction, eCommuter, and MassBike, because we're here to encourage you to ride and provide resources to make your riding happy. So let's keep in touch.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody.
Cool.
Great. we'll close it up now and have a great day, everyone.